talking about changes of directions. What have you made of the stuff that Turki Al-Sheikh's been talking about and this boxing league? And we've seen recently, obviously it's a land grab. They're going to try and get the best fighters to perhaps move away from the traditional environments, the WBC, the WBA, the IBF and whatever else. And perhaps some would say these sanctioning bodies deserve this because some of the bullshit that they trot out at times. But they're talking about a league format, and they're talking about a report coming out that you get 20K for a 10-round fight if you're unranked, or 50K when they're ranked between 5 and 10. Do you think this is the kind of dough, and it goes all the way up to 750,000 if you're a defending champion? Now, in heavyweight times, that's not going to make a lot of people particularly attracted, but when you get down to the lighter divisions, it might be. Do you see this as the kind of dough, Paul, that's going to fuel this league? Do you like this idea of what Turkey's doing, and do you think this is the kind of dough that's going to get people interested, engaged and across it from a fighting point of view?
It's a tough one. Now, I'm a big admirer of a fan, and I keep seeing people compare MMA and boxing, and I say if I was the only promoter in the whole world for the best boxing platform and I had every fighter in there, I would make the best fights also.
Yep.
But there'd be no longevity. Every champion has to fight the number one contender every single time. You're not going to get a champion that's going to stay there for long. The type of money that's being thrown about for the league at the moment, or touted for the league, I've seen the amounts. It's not good money at the moment because of the Saudi influx and because of what's going on, but probably 3 years ago for the unranked fights to get $20,000 for a 10-round fight, it'd been decent dough.
Yeah.
Dollars, by the way, but still being decent money. Now, there's young prospects fighting in 6-round fights making more than that at the moment because they're good ticket sales, because they got a good deal off the promoter, but also it's the opportunity and the prestige what the league may offer, the platform that it may be on. I think ultimately the sanctioning bodies getting a one finger put back up to them, I'm happy for it, I'm all day for it. You charge 3% of fighters' purses when they're fighting, you've got to put the badges on your shorts, you try and be the be all end all, you can put your belt in the bin and still have these big fights.
That means that Usyk will be paying 3% to every licensing belt.
Every single one.
I think it's an incentive for the younger fighters to coming through, and I think that, but when you're looking at that sort of money, I think that would have to change for the bigger names out there. You're talking about coming down in weights. You look at fighters like Gervonta Davis and whatnot, they're still pulling in $50 million a fight. They're still pulling in massive money, like the bigger names. So to get the bigger names involved in this, I think that the money will have to change for that. But I think it's a great format for the younger fighters coming through, for sure.
That's what I was going to say. Listen, I'm a big fan of Dana White. I'm a big fan of what he's done. He's done unbelievable at the UFC. But I don't think that's going to work in boxing. In boxing, the highest paid UFC fighters are, let's say, Conor McGregor, Francis Ngannou, and they made the chunk of the money in boxing. Now, it's not that boxing is better. MMA is doing great. I watched the UFC on the weekend with my son, the one in London, and they're doing brilliant. But the money that comes in and goes in the pot, a higher percentage needs to go back to fighters. Otherwise, the fighters are just going to go to a different promoter and get paid that way.
Well, that's the interesting phenomenon I thought was or potentially concerning for the Saudis and Dana. Is Dana runs the UFC in a very different way than boxing runs. If you've got the big time fighters in boxing, they normally take all the money out of the fight and there's a margin left in there for the promoter. In UFC, it's a different margin dynamic.
I've heard in the boxing it's nearer to the 90% of everything goes to the athletes. In the UFC, it's nearer to 15 or 20%.
And that then puts Dana in a situation where he's now got a blended environment where he's got UFC and he's got boxing, and he might find himself in having difficult times with the UFC fighters that are looking at what their boxing colleagues are getting and going, hang on a second, do you expect this new agenda and this new regime and this new set of thought processes to be ultimately successful?
I don't know, but again, Dana White will argue whatever he touches will be successful. It's some good luck to him, but I don't think that format is going to work in boxing, where if a boxer knows there's 10 million in the pot and only 2 million is getting paid to the fighters, they're going to want more of that because that's how it works on all the other show. A promoter nowadays will sit down on a pay-per-view show and say, here's what's going to happen, there's in the pot, there's my fee, there's the television fee, the rest is between you decide you split. The fighters have more power in boxing, the boxers have more control, and they know what they're worth and they'll get what they're worth. So it'll be interesting to see if it does work.
Okay. I want to talk to you about your brainchild, the Global Fighters Association. I can abbreviate it to the GFA for this conversation. I think you and I have spoken about it before, but walk me through where you're going with it, what you're doing, and how these sort of things have worked in the past.
So I had the idea years ago, obviously, of establishing a boxing union.
Yep.
There isn't a union in boxing. There's the PFA in football, obviously. There's other sports that have unions, and every workplace you go in is a union. I used to just think I'd love to have a minimum wage in for a fighter where it was a minimum, say, £1,000 a round or something more.
Yep.
If a fighter gets in the ring, they should have some form of healthcare or health cover. I had fights where I'd pull out 2 weeks before the fight with an infection in my elbow or a bruise on my hand or a cracked bone in my hand, and then all the camp you've put in, the work you've put in, you can't go and fight. If you don't fight, you don't get paid.
Yeah.
You got to refund everyone the tickets before you know it. You've lost money on the training camp, and we see it all the time with fighters. But more importantly, recently we've seen fighters die in the ring.
Indeed,
it happens all the time. It's so unfortunate. You know firsthand more than anyone what can happen in the boxing ring, Spencer. And afterwards, there's just no aftercare. There's no. You give your life to the sport, and it's not.
So how's
just
it going to work,
promoters.
Paul? I mean, we've seen Barry McGuigan try to do something like this years ago, and we've seen the advancing in support structures around the ring, better medical facilities, so that you don't have a Michael Watson situation manifest itself again. But to build out this entity, I'm always slightly resistant to unions because I don't think they bring the solutions that, and that's probably because I've been an employer on the other side of the argument, right? But they need to be funded from somewhere.
Yeah.
And ultimately there's always this tacit resistance. Like if the professional footballers had to pay to be members of the PFA, there'd be no members.
Yeah.
It's paid for by the broadcasters.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at this very good idea, and I think very valuable idea about the aftercare, the support and the infrastructure support. We saw it during COVID when people couldn't spar, they couldn't earn any money, people were in real challenging situations. So how is a structure or an organisation like this going to be built out and funded?
Very much the same as the PFA with broadcast deals. If we can take 1% of each broadcast deal from all the broadcasters now in boxing, then there's a hefty amount in the pot. We've had meetings with the PFA. We spoke to.
Is there an appetite for the broadcasters to do that? You've got DAZN at the table, you've got Sky at the table, you've got TNT.
There's Sky, there's TNT. In the States, there's a lot more. We're not looking just obviously in the UK, but there's a possibility. The same way in the music union, they take a small percentage of each ticket, 1% of each ticket sale in the country from each show goes into the union pot to look after ex-fighters or current fighters with regards to medicals. Like I believe we could have a big healthcare provider teamed up with us, so every single fighter in this country then, and there's probably about 1,500-1,600 of them, are then covered by some form of private healthcare when they get in the ring. So should they get an injury, they're covered off a policy which we can pay for as the union, as the association. It goes way beyond that also with regards to being an association and not just a union, that we can actually maybe have a look at how boxing is governed and the jurisdiction.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because I saw you teeing off on a British Boxing Board of Control specifically about the sanction on Eubank Jr. And I know you compared it to the throwing of the table that Derek Chisora did and what happened there. And you seem to be indicating a pretty significant level of disdain to the British Boxing Board of Control.
Who decides the punishment? Who decides the fine? Where does the fine go? Who gets the money? Who receives the money? I keep seeing ex-fighters pop up, and Spencer can answer this one. Have you ever had any conversations or care since your injury from the British Boxing Board of Control to see how you are?
Listen, that's exactly what it is. You pay your British Boxing Board of Control licence fees.
You pay your licence fee.
You pay your licence fees.
4% of each fight.
And like you say,
if you fight overseas, you have to pay 11.
Absolutely. And you see these punishments being thrown down. You go, Chris Eubank Jr. gets fined £100,000, and you go, where is that money going?
But they would say it goes back into grassroots.
Yeah, hold on a minute. You get someone like myself who gets injured just on the prime of coming into his prime of his career, not earn any real significant money. You get injured, you nearly lose your life, and you go, right, you got to rebuild and where's the phone call saying, how are you, mate? What are you doing? Here's a little bit of support. We should have some sort of insurance for that, some sort of cover for that. But just to go, oh, he looks like he's doing all right, off you go. You just go like that. There's no support there.
Is it not fair,
I think that it needs to be there.
I mean, I've been critical of Roberts, and not to personalise it, I've been critical of the British Boxing Board of Control because I think they've been toothless. I thought they were toothless over the situation with Conor Benn and that situation, and they've been toothless in other areas. But isn't it about funding? Because they've never seemed to have enough money to be able to be as professional an organisation as perhaps they could be, and to be as strong as they could be. If you are you seriously making progress with the broadcasters? Because I would have thought that it was a distribution from fighters to some extent that was going to be redeployed towards the union rather than the broadcasters.
If every fighter is paying a licence fee every year, they add up.
How much is the licence fee?
Probably 200 odd quid or something like that, here or there. I get mixed up because I haven't paid mine for 7 years. I've got a manager's one and a trainer's one now, so I have to pay them rates, but they're also going in the same pot. And then, obviously, the fight purses that come in, 4% of each purse goes back to the Boxing Board of Control. Now that's a lot of money.
When you talk about the money that's being,
the big fights,
the purses that these fighters are getting now, there's a lot of money.
Did you expect when you were fighting, Spence, obviously with your situation and your circumstances and the challenge that you had where you really put in the worst kind of situation you could have been in, did you have an expectation of care? Were you expecting to hear from your governing body to be in touch with you to understand what was going on with you.
Absolutely. Listen, there is a duty of care, isn't there? That's why we pay our licences, and that should be really your insurance. That God forbid something goes wrong, like it did with myself, there should be some form of support there, But because you go, right, so I've got to go and rebuild my life, and sort of like, and I took myself on this journey doing what I'm doing now, but I've done that through myself. But you go, there's no support or aftercare there, and you go, what's going on here? Do you know what I mean? And it's like, because I stayed involved in the industry, I didn't kick up any sort of stink.
And listen, we're not just beating the boxing board of control down here. The care at the ringside care, fight night care is the best in the world.
Yeah,
it's proven.
That's right.
They are the best. That's possibly why Spencer's still here. It's possibly why
because
a lot of the fighters have survived
because of the injuries of Michael Watson and the way that was dealt with.
So good.
Medical procedures have
really
improved, and hence why I made the recovery I did.
I would like to see a bit more for the after fight.
Are you cutting through? Because you and I spoke about this about a year ago, and I pushed back and said to you, how are you going to get the funding? Are you cutting through? Is this a realistic opportunity now?
Very. When you mentioned, obviously, Barry McGuigan and tried it, other people have tried it. This is from a different place. We're doing it from a trade unions position. We're getting the team together in the background from trade unions and not boxing people. There's only one or two boxing people on myself, my brother, and a couple of others who've just joined up with us. Bernard Dunn's on board, Amir Khan's on board. We're trying to get the full team ready so it can't fail, rather than just trying to get in quick and then.
It'll be fascinating to see. It'll be fascinating to see if you get some traction, because my pushback would be, if I'm a broadcaster, unions have been a thorn in my side at times. They've turned around and told me what I can and can't do, and as an employer, this might be slightly different, but I know that you come from the best position, so I'm not going to be so clever at your expense.
It's more rules as well.
Yeah.
I've lost count of how many times. Liam, our brother Liam, he goes in the opposite dressing room when any of us are fighting to do our hands. When he fights, I go in the dressing room. And I've been in dressing rooms and I'm arguing with officials saying that's not allowed. And the officials going, no, it is. But in the meantime, the official's getting a glove signed or they're getting a selfie in the corner. And the fans, and I get it totally, you're not getting paid, you're volunteering to do a good job, but you're not doing the job properly.
This is a professional sport.
You need to know what you're watching when them hands are being wrapped, and that's illegal. And I'm telling you it's illegal. And then we have to get the head of the board, the head of the commission to come and say, no, that's actually wrong. And it's like, if we can employ ex-fighters in that region, if we have a show in Manchester, we can have 2 or 3, 4 ex-fighters from Manchester. You're in that dressing room, you're in that dressing room. We know them hands are good.
Yeah.
I never want to go in an opponent's dressing room to watch hands being wrapped. I want the inspector to be able to know, and I want to have the faith to know that I don't even need to go in there. We shouldn't have to send a team member.
We'll see, Paul. I mean, I know you've got the passion for it, so I don't doubt you'll get it moving.